Today we're going to be discussing the SOLIDWORKS tools that can be utilized for CAMWorks. Now this is a question we get a lot, being the fact that CAMWorks is an integrated CAM package with SOLIDWORKS. The question being, what SOLIDWORKS tools can be used inside of CAMWorks and what can and cannot be used. Because a lot of the standalone CAM packages, they have some sort of CAD features in there. So really the question that we get a lot is, what SOLIDWORKS tools can you use for CAMWorks? So to go through, I kind of broke this down into 6 different points, and these 6 points are going to be what we're going to be talking about today. So utilizing SOLIDWORKS sketching for creating your pickup point or your 0 point, utilizing configurations either within CAMWorks or within SOLIDWORKS. We're going to talk about the stock manager and how we can kind of use those configurations along with some extruded sketches. We'll talk about some sketch toolpaths and how we go about creating that. And then along with sketching, we'll talk about the contain and void areas. And then kind of to wrap everything up, we'll talk about 3-axis, 3, 4, 5-axis machining with or utilizing SOLIDWORKS surfacing. The first thing I want to talk about today is the integrated CAM package. So the fact that, the question that we have today regarding the SOLIDWORKS tools is only for the fact that CAMWorks is integrated. So the ability to utilize our SOLIDWORKS functionality is really the goal that we're looking for today. And just another thing I want to point out is just the automatic updating. The fact that CAMWorks quickly updates the moment you make a change inside of SOLIDWORKS, and that's one of the pros about CAMWorks. So this little warning that you see here is something that you get when you move from CAMWorks over into SOLIDWORks, and from SOLIDWORKS into CAMWorks, sorry. If you guys are familiar with CAMWorks, you'll have seen this before, and it's just saying, hey, look, your parts changed. Do you want to rebuild the data? So once you make that change inside of SOLIDWORKS, it automatically updates inside of CAMWorks. Now, the first thing that I want to discuss today, as far as getting in and actually talking about the software, is the pickup point. So what we can do is we can use a SOLIDWORKS sketch to create our 0 point, and we'll also talk about a start hint, so the ability to say exactly where we want to start the toolpath, right? So let's get into the software and take a look at it. So when we go in to grab our start point, we typically need to have some sort of toolpath. So I'm going to quickly get some toolpaths here going. So one thing that's nice is I use my extract machinable features, or that automatic feature recognition, to go through and give me all of the features that are in here just so I can quickly get some stuff. So you can see it's automatically wanting to start cut things out without me actually having to manually do really anything at all. But if I go in and edit my setup, this is where I take a look at my origin. So it's looking right at the top center. We could do like a stock vertex. If we add a little bit of material to the vertex, we might want to adjust it a little bit just so we are grabbing or creating our 0 in the correct spot. But another way we can do this, I can start a sketch on this face. I can grab my circle tool, and it has to be a circle because it wants the center. I can go ahead and X out of my sketch. And when I edit my definition here, I have the ability to use that sketch for my 0 point. And then once I do so, it's going to tell me, hey, look, you need to recalculate your toolpaths for changing the stock to this. Because if we change the stock or our 0 point, that's obviously going to change our toolpath. So it's saying, hey, look, you need to regenerate these. We hit OK, it does it. Now, just another thing to take note of is if we go into our sketch here, we can rename it to be whatever we want. So typically we see this being called pickup point. And just another thing is the fact that we can also change its color to be red. So if somebody goes in and opens up this model, they know exactly where our pickup point is. Now, we just talked about the pickup point. Now, I want to get into talking about the start hint. Start hint, that is. So if you take a look at this rough machining operation, this goes in and tries to cut things out, right? But you can see it's kind of plunging right directly into the model and starting to go around. And we'll simulate this real quick here. So you can see it plunges right in and starts cutting. Well, we have this opening here. So why don't we start outside of the model? All right, so I'm going to start a sketch here. I'm just going to create a little circle, right? And I'll say, okay, I want to start outside of here. So what I need to do is I'll go into that rough mill, edit my definition. I'll go into my feature options. In my entity selected, I'll just select the circle, go ahead and click on OK. It regenerates that toolpath and it moves the start point to be outside of the material and cuts itself in, right? So instead of plunging directly in the material, if we've got an open gap there, let's start outside of it, go in and cut in. That's definitely going to help us. So we just talked about the pickup point and the start hint. So the ability to use these SOLIDWORKS sketches by just using circles can help us create a 0 point and also create that start hint, or basically our entry to the actual toolpath. Now I want to talk about configurations. So CAMWorks has the ability to specify multiple configurations, and we see this used two different ways. So if you have multiple SOLIDWORKS configurations, you could have multiple CAMWorks configurations that are associated with those SOLIDWORKS configurations. So if you have, just multiple configurations, you can specify them as each, so you don't have to create different files for it. Now, the other thing that we see is, like, if you have a part that's going to be on a turn machine and then it'll go on and be on a mill machine and kind of clean things up, you could have a configuration for a turning machine and a configuration for a milling machine, or all the different machines in the process. So if you're going to start off, just on a 2.5 axis mill, kind of hacking away a lot of the stock to get down to a semi-desired end result, then throw it on your 3-axis machine and kind of cut the finish or the rest of it away. This is where you could use those configurations so you don't have to have multiple parts. And I'll show you kind of how we would go about doing that. So inside this part here, just up here at the top of our feature tree, we have configurations. You can see I have one in here. I mean, if you're familiar with SOLIDWORKS, all you have to do is right click and just say new configuration. It throws one in there by default. You can go into the properties and you can just call this, milling operation 2. So that's just very, very easy. It defaults to using the SOLIDWORKS configuration that you're using. So if I go ahead and hit properties, if I right click on my configurations and say manage configurations, it's going to tell me the associated SOLIDWORKS configuration is default. So if it defaults to using whatever is here, so just keep that in mind. But if you're familiar with SOLIDWORKS configurations, you'll certainly feel really comfortable using the CAMWorks configurations. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the CAMWorks Stock Manager. So there was an additional tool that was brought in, I think it was in 2016, is the fact that you can now use configurations or different parts for your stock. Before, you could only use a bounding box, an extruded sketch, and an STL file. So I want to show you how you would use an additional configuration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a different part here. Now this part, if we take a look at it and we go to simulate, you can see it simulates with a solid bar. Now we would get this in as a hollow bar, right? Just a square stock. So we can go ahead and we want to use that for our simulation to make sure that everything is correct. Now, if you'll note, in our stock manager, we have the ability to use a part file with a different configuration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new configuration. I'm going to call this stock. I'll go back into SOLIDWORKS. I'll suppress everything here. Now let me hop back over into my default configuration that has all those cuts in here, and I'll hop back over into CAMWorks. When I go to my stock, I'll choose the part file. I'll choose to use the current part instead of browsing for a different part, and I'm going to use my stock configuration. Now when I go to simulate this, you can see it simulates using the hollow stock that we have. All right, so this is exactly what we're looking for, and it just makes sure that our simulations are going to be accurate to what we're doing. So let's hop back over into that other part real quick. Now inside of this, we'll jump back over, do a little light update here, and inside of this stock manager, if we had some really funky shaped stock in that we just had kind of left over, we can certainly use that. I'm gonna go ahead and start a sketch, and we might have something really strange like this. It might be fairly square but have a little chunk missing out of it at an angle, right? We can certainly use this as part of our stock. So if we go into our stock manager, use the sketch, grab this sketch, now we just have to specify a thickness. So we can do like an offset face here, right? And we'll just say offset is 0. just so it cuts through everything. And this could essentially be the stock that we use to simulate. So this is just using SOLIDWORKS sketching and configuration so that you can have an accurate representation when you go to do your simulation. Now let's talk about sketch toolpaths. So we'll talk about how it can handle contours and engravings. So sometimes you might get a part that doesn't have the geometry that you look for when you're creating something. So the nice thing about CAMWorks is when you're creating a pocket, you can simply just select on the face and use it. But in some instances, you might not want to do so. So I'll show you how to use that, and then we'll also talk about how to do some engraving. Right. So let me adjust onto this other part here. And one thing I want to show you, right, is if we go to create a new feature here manually, right, we select on this face and we'll say, okay, we just want to go up to this face. We go ahead and we finish this. Whoops, sorry, this doesn't need to be an engrave feature here. So let me go ahead and just delete this out. But what I wanted to show you was the fact that, okay, this is a pocket and we're going to go from here to here. Now, it's only going to rough this out, but we might want to rough all of this material out over here. So let me show you how I would go about doing this. I'd start a sketch here, turn off the grid, right? And I can maybe select this edge here. Let me go normal too so we get a better look at it. So I want to take all of this geometry and rough it out really easy, all in the same step. Right click here, I'll say select tangency, and then I'll do a convert, just kind of convert everything. I'll grab my line tool, just kind of finish it off. Right, and now we have that closed profile. Now I want to use this to rough out all of this material, and we'll go down to this step, and then we can kind of take the next step down, including this little side pocket. Right, so I'm going to exit the sketch, go back over, and I'm going to use this 2.5 axis feature as a pocket, and we're going to say use that sketch. Our end condition is going to be down here, and then if we have any islands, we're going to auto detect it. And what you'll notice is it'll pick up on these two things here. So we don't actually have to include these in our sketch. CAMWorks will automatically pick up on it. Now I can generate an operation plan for it, which is going to give us our rough and our finish. We're going to generate, and now we can simulate this. So you can see exactly what it's going to do. Obviously we can change the start hints, but what you'll see is it's going to rough out all that material that we're looking for right directly down, so we can kind of use these sketches for what we're trying to do. Now, the other thing that I want to show you was engraving. So let me just hide this sketch here. We'll go on the back side of this. Now, when we do something like an engrave inside of another CAM package, we might have to cut this out and then go in and specify it. Now, the great thing about SOLIDWORKS is the fact that we can just create our text using a sketch. Now, I'm just going to throw on a quick little sketch here. I'm just going to call this one, CADimensions. Now I'm going to go ahead and use a different font. Now, CAMWorks comes pre-installed with a CAMWorks font. And the great thing is it is actually a stick font that can be used to cut things out. So I can use that font. I can adjust where I want it. Do I want it centered? What font do I want? Maybe I want to bring this up to like a 48 size. We can adjust it all we want. Now what I can do, exit the sketch. I'm actually going to call this my engrave sketch so that when we're selecting on it inside of CAMWorks, we know what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a new 2.5 axis feature. I'm going to specify that I'm going to do an engrave. You'll see my engrave sketch is here. My end condition, maybe just 1 mil or even 0.5 millimeter. That's fine. That's all we need. I'm going to generate an operation plan for it. We'll generate our toolpath, and then we'll cut this guy out. So let me slow this down just a little bit. Maybe speed it up here. Right, and you can see that it goes through and cuts out the material that we're looking for to do an engrave. Now, if you're familiar with any other CAM package, well, this went a little bit too far, so let's adjust this really quick. So let's go into our end condition. Okay. 1 mil. Oh, it's because we put it in the wrong setup. That's my bad. Well, we'll worry about that another time. What we can do quickly is just add a new mill part setup. We'll add it to the back face, Yep, and then we can quickly change this thing over. So we'll just add it in real quick, engrave it, and condition. We'll do 0.5 mil, right? And just generate our operation plan. So I just had it in the wrong setup, so we're good to go here. But if you're familiar with any sort of other CAM package, you'll know that you might have to cut a pocket into something, and then inside of the actual CAM package, use or try and find the center line or create something. Inside of SOLIDWORKS, you can just go ahead and create these as sketches and then use them after the fact by using it like this, using that CAMWorks font. Now, if you have to use a stick font, you'll have to resort to kind of the other strategies or methodologies that you had before this one here. So we just talked about the sketch toolpaths and how to use a SOLIDWORKS sketch for CAMWorks, and then along with using our engrave as well. So you were able to kind of see some benefits to using SOLIDWORKS here, being the fact that the sketching is really easy to use inside of SOLIDWORKS. If you're familiar with SOLIDWORKS sketching, it just makes it really, really easy. So we just talked about SOLIDWORKS sketching and how it's easy to use to create toolpaths. How about if you want to use it for something else, like what we would consider a contain or a void area? So if you have some vise or something that comes in and clamps this part in a specific way, and you want to make sure that you don't cut into your clamp or your vise or whatever it may be, we can use these SOLIDWORKS sketches to make sure that that does not happen. Let's hop back over into SOLIDWORKS and take a look at one of these parts here. So taking a look at one of these, I've got my pocket here. We've got some stuff in here. So let's go ahead and we'll start a sketch on this face. And I'm just going to grab a square here, or my rectangle tool, and we'll say, okay, this is going to be our vise. We'll go back over into that rough. We'll say, hey, look, let's do a void area. So we have a void and contain area. We'll go ahead and specify that sketch. Now we do have some other options if we want to have multiple, if we do want to have an offset. So if you want to create it and have a small little offset, otherwise the tool will approximately offset it so that it runs right up next to what you have. Now it rebuilds that toolpath, and what you'll notice is it stops and creates the appropriate offset to satisfy that condition. So we can use these SOLIDWORKS sketches to create either contain or void areas depending on what we're doing. So it's just kind of additional functionality that's helpful to when you're using CAMWorks. Now, last but not least, I want to talk about SOLIDWORKS surfacing. So inside of CAMWorks, you typically just have the model that you're working on, and if you need to create some additional geometry, you can go ahead and do so. Now, the great thing about SOLIDWORKS, or CAMWorks and SOLIDWORKS, is, for the fact that you can use SOLIDWORKS functionality that's built right into so you can use the surfacing to alleviate some stuff. So what you'll notice is this part, we've got a hole down here. Now we're doing a constant step over, and it wants to step over into this. What we might want to do is have that machine over, like that hole's not even there, and then we'll cut the hole from the bottom side. So let's take a look at that model, and I'll show you what I mean. So taking a look at this model, what we can see is that constant step over goes down into that hole and essentially might ruin the finish or the edge that we want to maintain here. So we want to kind of machine as if it weren't even there. So let's hop back over into SOLIDWORKS. I'll go into my surfacing tool and I'll use the offset surface. We'll use a 0, and this changes it to copy. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say select tangency. It's going to grab all of those right in there. I go ahead and hit OK. Now what I can do is I can hide the solid here. I'm going to go ahead and just use my delete key, and I'm going to say, hey, look, let me delete this hole out of here. Deletes the hole, patches it all together, and we can now use this if need be. If you're familiar with this model, Jesse did it or used it in one of his tech tips. Hopefully we'll put the tech tip in the description, so if you want to check this out in a little bit further details, you'll be able to see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and edit this definition. I'm going to change these and clear out everything here, and I might just go ahead and just use this surface that I have. So we'll just kind of update everything, regenerate, and we'll take a look at all this. So I hit full, so it went through, and it's also extracting some of the other toolpaths. We don't really need to worry about that. We're just going to specifically worry about our 3-axis here. What you'll notice is by deleting that hole, you can see it machines over like it's not even there, and then we'll go ahead and put the hole in afterwards, and we're good to go. Now, if we wanted to maybe accentuate this, I guess, angled cut here, we could go ahead and offset that surface up a little bit so that it would make a nice couple passes over. So, you know, you can use the SOLIDWORKS surfacing to kind of accentuate some of the curvature that you have so that your machine, or 3-axis machine, or 4 or 5-axis, whatever you may be doing, can smoothly go in and transition the way you might need it to. So you can use the SOLIDWORKS surfacing functionality that's built into SOLIDWORKS for CAMWorks if you can find uses for it. So this is just one small example, and definitely take a look at Jesse's tech tip if you want to know a little bit more about this 3-axis surfacing-like approach, because he's got a very good tech tip on specifically how to do this in much more detail. So that's all I've got for today. I hope that you guys picked up on a couple things that you might not have known of for CAMWorks and how it can integrate with SOLIDWORKS. You know, if you have any other good suggestions, please let me know. I mean, I covered what I thought were the best topics, but if there's anything that I was missing, please let me know. And if you have any questions, you know, this is the time to ask them. Otherwise, thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you on the next one.
Don't forget to check us out on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and our blog for more great content by clicking on the links in the description below.